so excited. We're going to do a DIY tufted bench today. It isn't really super easy, but it is beautiful, and I have some tips for you guys that make it easier. And it's something that you're gonna wanna DIY because you would otherwise spend a lot of money on something like this in a store. It's very luxurious, and you know what feels really good on your butt? A tufted bench that we're gonna make with buttons that are covered in velvet. It's so cool. All right, I'll stop blabbing and get into it. Okay, so for this DIY, you're gonna need a lot of stuff. I'm of course gonna walk you through every single supply as I'm using it. All right, so this is a big piece of wood. You're making a bench, so you need something to sit on. So this is pretty essential. We had some leftover plywood around the office, so we actually cut 2 pieces because it was too thin to use just 1 piece, and we screwed them together. And then we also did a support piece on the bottom. That is more complicated than what you have to do. You could just go to the hardware store and find a nice thick board and then have them cut it to the exact size that you want your bench. This obviously isn't super long, but you could make a super long or wider bench. All right, so we don't wanna sit on a hard board, do we? We want some nice foam. So you want a piece of thick foam cut to the size of your board. You can get this at the fabric store or upholstery stores, and you can just cut it with a craft knife. We're gonna cover it up with some batting. So this basically just covers up those hard corners of the foam. This is pegboard. What's so nice about using this is basically your guide for the holes that you're going to drill and then put your buttons through and all of that, which can be really tedious if you have to measure it, but you don't have to measure it when you have pegboard. You won't actually use this on the finished bench, but this will be really, really helpful during the making of. So that's all the big stuff, and of course you need your table legs. I'm using these hairpin legs. You need your buttons, you need your fabric, you need a whole slew of stuff, but I will get into all of it as I am DIYing. Let me work my butt so I can sit my butt. So I have my board here on the table, and now I am placing the pegboard on top of it. And I'm using this straight edge to line up in the corner because I'm gonna need to repeat this process with the foam later, so you wanna just make sure that you're nice and lined up. I have this paper here that just shows rectangles. Let's say this is the bench. And it really depends on the look that you want. You could do a grid of tufts, which are just all lined up. For a diamond pattern, you need to have the center line be longer. So it's gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes, and then the 2 outer rows are gonna have 5 holes that are going to end up in the middle of those 6. And that's just sort of the visualization of what I then have to do in larger form. The next step is finding the center of your bench, because I want the center diamond to go around the center point. I'm not actually going to put a button in there, so I'm just gonna do this, but I'm gonna know that that is my center hole. And I don't wanna have my first button too close to the edge, so I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3 in. We've got an even thing happening. And since I wanna create a diamond, I'm gonna count out how many I went on either side this way. I can basically continue this pattern, just creating this diamond pattern all over the pegboard. Now I know exactly where I want to place my buttons, so I need to go through these holes in the pegboard and mark on my board using the marker so that I know where to drill. Now I can remove my helpful pegboard. So now I've got my drill and drill bit, and I am going to drill through these marks. Now I have my piece of foam on the table, and I have my pegboard guide laying down here over the foam because I need to mark the exact same pattern that I did on the board onto the foam, because we're gonna go through the foam, through the board to get our buttons nice and cinched on. Ta-da! Little black dots. Now I'm gonna take a sharp blade and go through these holes, and you wanna make sure that you're really getting through, obviously, all of the foam, and it's okay to make a nice big X through each of these holes because you actually want the button to really nestle down in the foam. You want them nice and snug in there. Just watch your fingers on the other side. And then I just have to repeat with all of these. Watch a good movie while you're doing this project. So now it's time to sandwich these two together, and I'm gonna use a spray adhesive. I put the upholstery needles, which are basically just really long needles, through the two outer holes, which will just help me kind of line up as I lay this down onto the board. We've got some batting here. You can't really make really good snow angels with this, like you kind of get rug burn. We just kind of want to center this. We want to also spray adhesive this on to the foam. So now that I've got it lined up, I'm just gonna lay a layer of the spray adhesive. Go to sleep, foam. All right, so I put my whole sandwich here on some crates because I want to be able to get up underneath for this next step. I took out my needle guides because I don't need those anymore since everything is adhered together. And now it's time for the pretty stuff. I am using this beautiful blue velvet. I love to use a velvet with a tufted piece because it just adds to that luxurious look. It reflects light. It's way longer than I will need, but don't trim your fabric yet because the next step of pushing the buttons through is gonna gather more fabric, and then we wanna flip it around and have enough excess to staple it all underneath. I have some thread. Now, this isn't just your average thread. This is extra strong upholstery thread. We are gonna be pulling it very tight and it cannot snap. You want your upholstery needles. These are the buttons. I highly recommend buying either pre-covered buttons or getting your buttons covered in a fabric district around you, somewhere where they have an industrial button cover. The other thing that I have are these plastic buttons, which are going to go underneath the bench. You're not gonna see these aren't part of the design, but they are part of the function because they act as the stopper for your thread to tie it and stop it from going back up through the hole. I am going to do the center button first, so I'm gonna cut a piece of my thread the needle, and now I'm gonna take one of my buttons and have it ready, and I need to go up from underneath. I'm gonna find my center hole. All right, we made it through. Look at that. All right, so obviously we wanna make sure we still have the tail of the thread hanging through on the bottom, and now I'm gonna take one of my buttons and thread it through, and then I'm gonna go back down through. Now is the part where we get to make our first tuft. Look, woo, look how pretty. It's like on a trampoline. There you are. So we've got the needle side through and the tail side through, and that's where we use this extra button. I threaded the needle through this plastic button, and now I'm tying it underneath the button and using this as a stopper to tie a really snug knot. You might even want to have a friend help you push down the button at the top. We're knotting it! So you will continue this same technique with all of the buttons, but make sure you keep in mind where you're placing your pleats because the fabric will naturally pleat from pucker to pucker and you want those to look pretty. So fold it over and make sure you like the fold before you really snug down your button. All right, well, it takes a while, but the payoff is worth it, guys. This looks so amazing and it feels as soft as it looks. Now the next step will be to turn it over carefully. Now is when you can trim a little bit of this excess if you want, because that can just make it easier to then do the stapling. I know that the staples are gonna end up around here. I'm gonna just cut off a little bit. So I've trimmed the batting and I think I'm just gonna kind of tack this down into place, but the thing that you wanna keep in mind is your leg placement, because you don't want to be having to screw your legs in over the batting. I'm gonna put them here. So now I know that I need to trim my batting a little bit more to make sure that they will have room to go there. These can go over the fabric, but the batting will make them a little loose. All right, so I've got my staple gun and I'm just gonna staple around the perimeter starting at the center of each side. Boop. Around the corner, it gets a little bit trickier because you don't want the excess to go on one side or the other. You want it nicely balanced. So you just kind of play around with folding and tucking it over until you like the way that it's folded around this corner, and then you'll do the same with the fabric. And you're gonna need a nice amount of staples, obviously, around the corners. You can just trim all this excess. So now that I have my batting stapled down, it's time to move on to the fabric. So it's pretty much the same process. The only thing is that I am going to be using this excess of fabric to cover up all these buttons and the raw wood underneath. So if anyone ever peered under my bench, which they would be welcome to, they will just see blue. Keep in mind that you are continuing the pleat on the other side that you created with the tuft, so just make sure you're always checking in. That looks good. All right, so I'm gonna do just an anchoring staple here to keep my pleat. So I've got my 2 center anchoring points here, and now I'm gonna move on to either side here. And this is just to make sure that as I am making these taut, I'm not pulling too much from the center. I'm gonna do this step of just sealing off this bottom using mostly a hot glue gun. I may use a couple staples here and there to just further secure it, but I think a hot glue gun's gonna do the trick. And now it's time for the legs. So we have those areas that I designated earlier that don't have the batting, so we can really drill nice and flush. And legs are on. Let's see what this looks like. I'm seriously in love with this. Guys, look! It was, you know, some work with the staple gun and all that, but man, this was worth it. I love the delicate hairpin legs with this beautiful tufted top. It's gonna welcome people in. It's gonna be the perfect tufted tushy perch. Tufted tushy perch. Say that 10 times fast. Tufted tushy perch, 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 perch. I can't say it once. Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. That's what's fun about DIYs. You get to just get in it and use different materials. And what I love about this technique is you can use it in different applications on a headboard, maybe a chair. If you do this project, I would love to see, please post your pictures using hashtag Mr. Kate so we can share in each other's tuftedness. That bench just looks so amazing in our welcome hello room. Please subscribe because we have more DIY videos coming at you. Thumbs up too, because my fingers are sore from tufting, so you guys can give me a thumbs up because mine are a little feeble at the moment. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Mwah. Bye. Mr. Kate! Over and work around the shape, because once you connect more chains, it will no longer lay flat. Now connect your 4 long pieces of chain, 2 on either side, together and